same cat from before.
There he is!
How did he get here in the first place? Wait!
It's soothing watching the flames. Hey, could this be...
To-do list. 1. Eat a whole cake by myself. 2. Share a meal with my family. 3. Visit all the friends I can. 4. Read all the books I've wanted to. 5. Buy the clothes I always dreamed of. 6. Make up with that certain somebody.
The silver bell wasn't a particularly outstanding decoration, but it did ring the most beautifully. I'd always wondered what kind of home such a lovely bell had come from. It belonged to an old woman who lived alone without relatives, in a large mansion I'd never seen before.
Madam, it's time for supper.
Thank you, dear.
Madam, the lilies in the garden have bloomed. I've put them in this vase.
What a lovely scent.
Madam, it started raining. Allow me to close the windows.
Yes. And draw the curtains, too.
The old woman was waited on hand and foot by her servants. She'd rely on their help as she sat idly in her chair, listening to her favorite music. She'd even ask them to change out the records. But most of the servants seemed to genuinely adore their employer. But there was one thing the old woman would ask several times a day.
Excuse me, but could you call Chris here for me?
Later that same day,
Oh, where is Chris?
and again even later.
Please find Chris for me.
Though normally obedient, this one request was always met with hesitation.
Madam, Chris is already...
The maids would start cautiously. "Oh yes, you're quite right," the old woman would say, cutting them off.
She's not with us anymore, is she? I'd nearly forgotten.
She'd murmur with a nod. But not a few hours later, she'd ask the same questions again. She had them stop her favorite record.
Oh, wherever could my darling Chris be?
One rainy night, the mansion was in an uproar.
Madam? Madam!
The servants dashed through the halls in a frenzy. Finally, one of the maids shouted in despair.
Why can't I find her cane?
Though it wasn't too cold outside, the sheets of rain continued to pour relentlessly.
She couldn't have gone outside. Could she?
A chill passed over the gathered servants before they set out. They put on their coats and called for help outside. I tore my eyes from them and made for the rain-drenched town. Amidst the downpour, I smelled the sweet fragrance of lily. In the back lane of a park, far from the mansion, I made out the figure of the old woman. She was surrounded by a crowd who moved and gabbed around her.
Come on, lady, you'll catch your death out here. Maybe you should see the police.
The old woman's shoes and designer clothes were soaked through. A man tried taking her by the hand, but the old woman refused to budge, her face adamant. Fed up with her antics, the men finally left, leaving her behind. I cautiously stepped just into her field of vision, and without saying a word, rang my silver bell. It rang clear through the rain. The old woman raised her head sharply in surprise, her blurry eyes looking at me.
Chris?
The old lady rasped. I rang the bell again in a nod, and then turned around.
Chris, wait! Wait for me!
Her cane clicked as she followed me. I may not be able to carry her all the way to the mansion, but it'd be enough to bring her to her servants. I stopped often to look over my shoulder, to make sure I didn't lose her. The sound of that beautiful bell was a beacon. At last, one of the servants noticed the old woman and shouted, "Madam!" As she ran towards her, the old woman bent down to scoop me up and held me, trembling. The servants weren't able to hide their surprise, seeing how much the late Chris had changed upon her return. Not one of them said that I wasn't Chris, because the old woman called me so. The maids nodded in obedience, just glad that their beloved employer had returned home safe. I am Chris. Chris with her silver bell. I'm the tiny, adorable Chris, loved by her grandmother in this grand mansion.